I was probably about 7 years old. I think it was my great aunt who said, let me take a picture of you. I was drinking a soda and I remember putting the bottle to my lips and turning sideways. Is this my best side? I felt like I was doing the famous line from Sunset Boulevard, I'm ready for my close-up. And I knew then. It just hit me that I was going to be an actress.
And you have been a star patient.
Thank you, Amy. You've been a star nurse.
How do I look?
You look terrific, Laurel. You really do.
I had been a dancer from the time I was 7 years old. My mother was a piano player and a singer, a church kind of piano player and singer. But because of her background, she thought that her daughters should probably be exposed to that. So she took us down to the Dorothy Henry studio in Minneapolis. You would learn to handle a microphone and learn how to do baton and tap dancing and a little bit of singing. So that's where I started. And I really I blossomed. It was me, yeah, everything about it. There wasn't anything. I could twirl with both hands, baton, flip them up in the air and do gymnastics. It was meant to be. In high school, I choreographed the musicals that we did and danced in the chorus. Then when I went on to undergraduate school, that was logical. Originally, I'm from Minnesota, from Minneapolis, and I ended up going down to Huntsville, Alabama from Minnesota. And my dance director said, I can give you a recommendation for the San Francisco Ballet. So she did, and I walked into the ballet studio and they said, oh, well, let's see what you can do. And so I did, and they said, okay, we'll give you a start. So I kept doing the major productions that they did. I tried very hard to follow in my father's footsteps. He felt that you really needed to be financially solvent and you needed to be respected in the community. You need to live right. My father taught me ethics and moral values, and my mother was the artist. I tried very hard to adhere to my dad's teachings. So I went away to school to become an English teacher. My undergraduate degree is in education. So I tried very hard because Dad said, you might be very talented, but that is a very risky profession and you do not want to get yourself in danger. Okay, Dad. And so I did, and every time I did a show, everybody said, you're an actor, go out and do it. Yeah, but my dad, yeah, I know, but make your choice. And life changed again, and about 3 months later, I ended up in Las Vegas. They didn't really have a dance studio there, so I thought, well, how about a casino job? And I went down to one of the major casinos and interviewed, and they were just kind of snickering, and I thought, why? Because I said, I'm a good dancer, and gave them my background. Oh, I'm sure you are, honey, but you need to be 6'2". What? All of our showgirls are, 5'11" to 6'2", and you're just too short. Do you have your own act? I said, no. So that was the end of my dance dreams. And I ended up going to the University of Nevada at Las Vegas and finished my undergraduate degree there. The first show that I did, the director said, I can't hear you. I cannot hear you. If I can't hear you by your next line, I'm walking out. He got up and he walked out, and that's when I learned to project. My mentor at the University of Nevada said, don't you know in your heart that you're an actress? Go be an actor. Yeah, but I don't know anything about it. And, I just got my undergraduate degree, and that was not in theater, that was in English. No, it's time to take a chance. You've got your whole life ahead of you. Do it. My dad, said, oh, don't become an actress. My gosh, that's the worst choice you could possibly. Teach acting, but don't do it. He said, that's no career. You're never going to have any security whatsoever. You're going to have to nickel and dime it, and that's not the way you were raised. You work for a living. Well, yeah, acting is working. No, it's not. So I taught there at the university for 1 year just to get some money saved up. So that's when I went back to Minnesota because I knew that I didn't know enough. I had had no training at all. Then I went to the University of Minnesota in Minneapolis and got my graduate degree. I didn't know makeup, I didn't know anything about theater except my instincts. I knew nothing, and it was all fascinating, just absolutely fascinating. Everything, I couldn't get enough. Studying every class I could possibly think of, anything that was related to the arts at all, including box office. Ron Perlman was in my class, Tova Feldshuh, Burt Rosario, Joel Brooks, on and on I could go. We were all just green,
It's her bedtime. Why does she get a reward for stabbing me? Well, we catch our flies with honey, I'm afraid. We haven't a heart for much else.
I spent one summer on the Minnesota Showboat, and we did what they used to do in theater. That is, every scene change, there would be what they would call an olio, and it was a scene-changing piece of entertainment. We got ourselves into a bind, and I was doing Lady of Lyon, and I had this wonderful hat and all of that on, but I was in the next scene, and they had nobody to do the olio. So I stood behind the frame, like a proscenium. I stood behind one part of the upright, and I just popped my head out and took off my hat and sang the song while they undressed me and redressed me while the body was off stage. My head was doing this and singing my heart out, and then I had to walk on. And so I walked on in this totally different costume. I mean, the audience always applauded because they couldn't believe what had just happened. I eventually did go to the Guthrie and did a small production there. And Michael Langham, who was the artistic director at that time, said, "You are the best old lady on FISA that I've ever seen. You've got to do something with this career." Okay, so I was chosen to go to New York City to do some auditioning for, at that time it was 22 repertory companies all around the United States. And I was picked by several of them, and I decided, okay, my dad would say, pay your bills first. Get yourself on a financial footing before you ever take one big risk like this. So I decided I would accept the job offer from the University of Utah in Salt Lake City. It was a 2-year contract to teach there, and I thought, okay, that'll get me on my financial feet, and then I can go leap if I want to.
I haven't started fighting.
I was very skilled in stage combat and fencing and movement, blocking, choreography, all of that stuff. So I set up the BFA, MFA stage movement program. And while I was teaching there, that's when the director and the road company came through for Snowman.
Gentlemen, the situation hasn't changed. My partner will be found. I've got every available plane in Utah looking for him.
Oh, Shatner. Everybody wants to know. Well, we did a film together, independent film called Snowman, and the whole point of the film was to make Mel Torme an actor, because he was, of course, a singer, and he wanted to kind of widen his horizons. So I was told that he wanted to become an actor, and he had the lead in this particular independent film. Shatner was a best buddy or his agent or something. It doesn't matter. But they called in Shatner because of the name value. So I was Shatner's girlfriend and walked in for the audition and a hotel room. And I walked in and Shatner was standing there and the director was right there and he said, "Okay, kiss him." "What? I don't even know him. You haven't even introduced us." And he said, "Look, I want to just cut through it right now and find out how it's going to look." "Okay." Kiss. "All right. Okay, good. Now sit down. All right. Now that the air is cleared and we got the worst thing out of the way, now I'd like you to meet each other." The scene that I was in with him was in a hot tub. So we got in this hotel hot tub and set up the cameras. The director said, "Okay, we need to get closer because this is the kissing scene." Okay, and so I was sitting on, there's a little shelf, that you sit on. And he said, "Okay, now, no, that's not gonna work. Okay, let's try this side." And we tried the other side. "No, that's not gonna work either. It's just too awkward looking." He said, "Okay, straddle him." Okay. So Shatner is sitting on the bench and I'm straddling him, facing him. And okay, director, put your arm around him. Okay, now the other one on his face. All right, bend in, bend in, bend in, and kiss. Okay, good. All right, fine, we're done. Go ahead and drive off. Everybody packed up and went home. I don't know, maybe a week later or so, Shatner called the university, but he called in to the main switchboard there. And I was just between classes at the moment when this loud speaker came on. Miss Adams, you're wanted in the office. William Shatner is calling you." And the whole university knew, and all the students, it was just an amazing thing. I was so embarrassed, it was terrible. But at any rate, we sort of saw each other for a while, yeah. Then I decided, okay, it's time for me to move on. So I decided I was going to go to Chicago and do some dinner theater, and I had set everything up to go and do that. So I'd given up the rental of my apartment, so I had nowhere to live. And the musical director of a show I had just finished said, "Well, come on, move in with us." I said, "Yeah, but it's all guys." I think there were 5 guys. And he said, "Don't worry, we'll respect your minimum, blah, blah, blah." And so I moved in. They made room for me in a big closet. No windows in it, so it was like 24 hours of darkness, and you know what your circadian rhythms do. And I was just sleeping all the time. Anyway, this movie company came through town, and one of the 5 guys said, "I want to go and audition. I hear that you're a pretty good teacher, so would you coach me as we drive over?" And I said, "Well, where's the audition?" And he said, "In the motel." I said, "In the motel? You're going to actually audition in a motel?" I said, "Do you have any idea what that could mean?" "No." So I didn't bother explaining. I figured he was a guy, he should know. And I coached him on this small part, and he went into the motel room and he read, and the director walked him back out to the truck that we were in, and he looked at me and he said, "Why aren't you auditioning?" And I said, "Well, because I'm going to Chicago to probably do dinner theater." And he said, "Well, come on in and read." And I thought, in the motel room. So I walked in, and there were 2 twin beds. I sat on one, he sat on the other, and there were 2 or 3 other people there. So I figured, okay, it's going to be all right. And he read me for the part and walked me back out to the car. He said, "Thank you very much for reading." He said, "I have one question." He said, "Do you mind being seen without makeup?" And I said, "Well, you're the one who has to look at me without makeup." And he just laughed, and that was the end of it. I was set to go. I had my bus ticket to get to the airport and all of that. I was all set to go. And then the telephone rang. Picked up the phone. Hello, Miss Adams, yeah? Well, what are your measurements? Motel room, measurements, I said, I think you must have the wrong number. And I was ready to hang. No, don't hang up. This is the movie company that you auditioned for. We're wanting your measurements for the costume lady. And I said, what are you talking about? Well, you got a job for 3 weeks in Cody, Wyoming, doing 7 Alone. What? I said, I have no idea what you're talking about. Well, you auditioned, didn't you? Yeah. Well, you got the job. Well, nobody sent me a contract. Oh my God, don't move. Hang up the phone, do not move. Click, all right, counting, right back. I mean, it couldn't have been a minute. Pick it up. This is the assistant director. That was the costume lady who called you. She wanted your measurements. I am terribly sorry. I don't know why we didn't get a contract to you, but you have a contract for 3 weeks' work on 7 Alone, and we're going to Cody, Wyoming, and we're going to start shooting tomorrow. We need you now. Okay. So I made immediate plans to go to Cody, Wyoming. Spent 3 weeks on location doing that film.
Not for him, none of this would have happened. And this poor child with the broken leg.
Now, Dr. Dutch, you can't blame John for the broken leg. And I'm sure he's sorry about the cows.
Billy and the others are bringing him back now.
Well, I'd better go heat up his supper then. Come on, Dr. Dutch.
And when I was through with my part of it, the director, Earl Bellamy, said to me, well, you know, what are you going to do now that you're finished here? I said, well, I was headed for Chicago to do dinner theater. Oh, no, 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 no. You've got to go to Hollywood. What? So he said, I will guarantee you 10 interviews with producers at major studios if you will go to Hollywood. Okay. So I moved to LA and spent 26 years there. My leading man, the guy who played my husband in 7 Alone, Jim Griffith, was a character actor, very well known in Hollywood for playing character roles. Along with Earl Bellamy, the director, he said, well, and I can guarantee you at least an interview with my agent. So I went over to interview, and he said, okay, I tell you what, I know it's your first time in Tinseltown, and I know that you don't know what to expect, so I am very grateful for the interview, and I think what you need to do is to think it over and decide what you want to do. So I walked out and I thought, well, that was that. He just was trying to be polite. So the next day, he called me, like at 9 o'clock in the morning, and he said, well, what did you decide? And I said, well, frankly, I thought you were blowing me off. And he said, oh, no, I just wanted you to know that this is a big commitment, and you needed to think about it. And I said, well, sure, we'll give it a shot. And he said, oh, thank goodness, because I have an interview with you with Little House on the Prairie. Now? Yes. Okay. I borrowed some clothing and went to interview at Little House on the Prairie and read for Michael Landon. It went very well, and he said, you're just not quite right. I mean, they're very honest with you. I mean, they say, I know you're too old, or you're too young, or your hair's the wrong color, or you got wrinkles. I mean, whoa. You have to have thick skin, believe me. And then they expect you to unzip and let all your emotions out. After you've got all these layers of mask in front of it, you know, go ahead, tell me I'm old. That's fine. Okay, I don't mind. I'm 30 years old, I'm old. Okay, got it. It is a terrible, terrible thing. I mean, they'd be insults to anybody else. But you just learn, oh no, they're looking at you like the camera says. I worked with Susan Lucci, for example, and I remember she was in this wonderful evening gown, and she turned her head to the camera. The cameraman said, no, and the director said, cut, and the cameraman said, oh, okay. And so the director walked up to Susan Lucci and said to her, you've got wrinkles on your neck. Don't turn that way. Turn your whole body. no wrinkles. Oh my God. And this was Susan Lucci. I thought, wow, you do have to have thick skin. I wasn't right for that one. But within just a few weeks, they called me back for a different role in a different episode of Little House on the Prairie.
To be used as needed. How are you feeling, Helga?
Never better.
Well, I expect I'll be out here again before the week is out.
She's a lovely girl. I'm so happy for you.
She is a lovely girl. And don't jump to conclusions.
It was an episode called Doctor's Lady, and I was a pregnant farm wife and just about to deliver a baby. And I was going through all the things that women go through, the physical machinations and so forth. Had the baby in my arms, a real baby in my arms. Never held a real baby before. So I did that, and then I did a Starsky and Hutch almost immediately again. And then I didn't work for a year. You know, it was lots of interviews, but nothing happened. And then finally, I changed my hair color to blonde, and that made all the difference. And I found out later that redheads are so distinct on camera that you only want one redhead in a scene. And if I were in a scene with another redhead, they would 86 me because I wasn't the star. So I found that out, and I went blonde because everybody in Hollywood is blonde. It's California, right? And I started working right away.
You're number 28. Have a seat and fill that out, please.
Oh, no. I'm just here for the Santa thing, you know.
This is it. Have a seat.
No, I don't want a job. I just want to know where Santa is.
Well, you want the toy department, 3rd floor.
Oh, thank you.
I was born Bernice, and I hated the name, but it was my father's mother, and so I understood, even as a kid, that that was special to him. So I put up with it. But I said, could we change it at least to B, B-E-A? And he said, yes, at least the A is still in it, and yeah, okay, that'll be fine. So they all called me B. My first agent was so excited to represent me, and he said, you're sure that this is the name you want? And I said, well, it's what I've been called all my life. And he said, okay, fine. So he sent me to an interview for Emergency, which was a half-hour drama, rescue kind of TV series at the time. And I went over to the interview and got like 3 or 4 sentences out, and he said, thank you, we'll contact your agent, like they always do. Usually you get a chance to read something, and I didn't even read anything. So I thought I really bombed. So my agent and I talked, and he said, no, it had nothing to do with your talent. It's your name. And I said, what is wrong with my name? And he said, well, it's a black name, and you're not. And the casting director made the mistake of just hearing your name and assuming. And that's why he asked to see you. And you walked through the door and you weren't. So that's why he said thank you and no thank you. So we have to change your name. Okay, fine. He said, I'll make up a list of 10 names, and your manager should do the same thing, and you do too, because we want some input from you. So we all did, and we culled out the ones we didn't like, and Laurel was on one of their lists. He said, I think we'll go with Laurel. And he said, now what do you want to do about the last name? And I said, well, Laurel Morris is not, I don't even like that. So he said, okay, so let's see your list. And since it was a sort of betrayal of my dad, you know, by opting to not do his mother's first name, I said, how about if we go with Adams, because that's my father's family name, and Laurel Adams kind of goes together. And he said, yeah, I like the ring of that. So that's what we did. I liked it. I was very happy with it, and I understood the reasoning, and it sounded good. I've been Laurel longer than I ever was B. So for me, B is who? I just don't respond to it. I have to think twice. At home, it was always B. It still is. It's very hard for my sister even to remember to call me Laurel. But as I keep telling all of them, I've been Laurel longer than I was ever B. But they didn't know me so well as Laurel.
We're gonna be all right.
No, we're not. We don't own this place.
I know this. Don't you think I know this?
Jed, don't you see? This is our home, and we don't own our own home.
For film work, you jump all around the script. You have no idea, you know, they tell you the night before, the next day, and you might have 40 pages of script to learn. And so you learn it. You're up all night learning your lines for the next day's shoot. Another Western that I did, Pony Express rider. When I showed up on a location the very first day, they said, okay, we're going to shoot page 60 or whatever it was, and you're burying your husband. Okay, who is my husband? Well, it's Ken Curtis.
What are you fretting about, girl?
You mean Festus from Gunsmoke? Yeah, and you're burying him. Okay. Is he here? No, he doesn't come in until tomorrow. All right, fine. And this is your oldest son, okay. And so my job was to cry my heart out, of course, you know, to be the bereaved widow. The makeup person came up with this vial of eye drops. And I said, what are you doing? And she said, well, I'm going to give you liquid tears. I said, I don't need liquid tears. She said, you mean you can cry? I said, absolutely. So, you know, you do what an actor does. You dive into your memories and you come up with the memory that makes you cry. And, all right, ready, rolling, action. And I'm sobbing and sobbing and sobbing and putting my arms around this kid I didn't even know. He's my son. On and on and on, you know. Cut. One take, not bad. I have a lot of memories that if I think about them, I will cry. When I'm teaching acting students or working with actors for a show, I like that part of the method approach, that you dig into your own memories and find something that resonates with you. And don't tell me. It's your private memory, don't tell me. But you need to dig for the one that's going to provoke the emotional response, the reaction that you need right now. And try not to cry. Because choking back trying not to cry is more productive, it's more effective than actually crying. The next day, we went to a different location altogether. Okay, rolling and action.
Jed, wait a minute.
My lines were something like, if you're not going to sell those sheep and pasture the cattle, then you can find yourself a new ranch. And I walked off. Okay, so that was that. And then the next scene, okay, all right, so Ken, you're going to kiss your wife goodbye. Okay, kiss, and all right, and wave, and off he goes. All right, and you know, it's just chopping around like that. The Shatner experience with the walking in the door and kissing him prepared me for anything. Gary Lockwood, he and I did Starsky and Hutch together. I played his wife, always played wives, and the first scene that we shot was a kissing scene. And I mean, we were married, so who knows, I didn't know what kind of kiss they expected it to be. But Gary Lockwood is very tall, and I'm short. So I said, it's not going to work here. How are we going to do this? And the director said, cut. Okay, I see your point. So they brought out what's called a half apple, a crate that you stand on, so that the height for the close-ups, was a lot more effective. So then that was how we did the kissing scene in that one. I'm standing on a crate.
May I help you, ladies?
Yes.
Go on.
Ma'am, she'd like to buy a brassiere.
I see.
A red one. Honey. All right, a black one.
I'm sorry, ladies, but our training bras only come in white.
We all had day jobs, unless you were a celebrity with a sitcom of your own or something like that. You just had no assurance that you were going to ever work again. You never knew. The day job that I was doing was reading to court reporters. It was a lot of fun because, of course, as an actor, you can impersonate the characters because these are all court cases that you were reading from to teach the new stenographers how to type fast enough, to do it.
Chuck,
Oh, Gert.
it's so good to see you.
Well, it's good to see you.
How
A
are
long
you?
time. I'm fine. Where's Tom?
He's out the back.
Every year I'd come home for Christmas and my parents would say, how's it going? I got 3 or 4 jobs this year. Oh, that's good. So when are you coming home? I'm not. At any rate, I did get a job at a dinner theater in Kansas City. The gentleman who played my lead was Richard Sanders from WKRP in Cincinnati. So he was the draw, of course, and I was the actress. I had relatives in Missouri, so my parents made an excuse to come down to visit the relatives and to drop into this dinner theater to see me do this show. And it was same time next year, which is a 2-character show, and we're on stage the whole time. And the whole idea is that they start when they're mid-20s, 30s, and they carry on like a 20-year relationship. Once a year, they rendezvous at this hotel. You see the change in their characters from when they were young to when they get to be, senior citizens of a sort. And you see the change in their personality and in their makeup and the costuming and the hair and the wrinkles and all of that. And at the end of the show, after we took our curtain call, I just said, this is a very special night for me because my mom and dad are in the audience, and I had them stand up, and they, were embarrassed but proud. And then after the show, they came to see me, and my dad said, I understand. Do it. And that changed everything.
Please be good to her. These 2 weeks, try to be very good to her. I will.
Anyway, I worked with Paul Michael Glaser and David Soul and Jack Klugman, for example. I did the Lawrence Welk Dinner Theater with him. You've got 3 days to put the shows together, and in other words, you have to show up at the first rehearsal having all your lines memorized. And you got to be rock solid. And I played this ex-madam that he knew from way back when. It was funny because Jack Klugman actually interviewed me. Anybody else would have been intimidated by Jack Klugman because he had just finished Quincy, MD. And everybody was, oh, you've got to not, Well, I read the role. He needed to have a nurse, around-the-clock care. And then when I finished, because this was a nurse who was a former madam who knew him when, so I swatted him on the butt. And Jack Klugman did, and I walked out. They called me the same day and said, you got the part. 270 women auditioned for that role. I got it. Well, there were a lot of shows in LA that I did that were original scripts, so nobody knows them. I was doing the part of a hooker, and a lot of my friends say, you played a hooker? I said, oh yeah, actually I played 3 or 4 of them, and a madam. And they said, you? I said, yeah. How could that possibly be? And I did ask one of my directors who cast me as a hooker, and I said, why did you cast me as this? You know, because in film, I'm known as the best friend of the lead. That's the role I play, the best friend. My director said, you don't look like a hooker, and that's the surprise. Oh, I get it, I get it. I remember in LA, I was doing the dinner theater show with Tab Hunter, Here Lies Jeremy Troy. The other actors in the cast were professional, but they treated it as though it was community theater. They did not respect the process like I did. Even with an audience there, in the middle of a performance, they would break up, laugh at something that happened. If somebody dropped a line or couldn't remember to sit down when they were supposed to, they were laughing, snickering, trying to hide it. And I just hated that, absolutely hated that. There was a dinner scene, and we had this big table, and all the cast was sitting around the table, and I, as the wife, was supposed to be serving dinner. The idea was that I would pick up with a forceps the food item. My character was upset with them and really bent out of shape. So the idea was to pick it up, like a foot off the plate and drop it, because that was my attitude. I didn't have anything to say, but they knew that I was upset. Well, they had a problem with one of the food items, and they froze the food items so that they would be fresh, and then they would thaw out, and then by performance time, they'd be ready. Never had a problem until this night when they didn't thaw out the chicken leg. So I picked it up and I dropped it on the plate, and of course it was frozen solid, so the plate cracked. The chicken leg bounced into the audience, into the lap of a woman who was sitting there. Oh my God. And I was so tired of weeks of holding on to my anger, my frustration with the rest of the cast who was breaking up at a snap, and I just let it go. I mean, the audience understood. They thought it was hilarious too, so what's the difference? But after the show, the cast said, we've never seen you break character before. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, now we know what we look like.
Excuse me, aren't you Ben Matlock?
I'm terribly sorry. You must have him confused with somebody else.
When you were a union actor, you would join a small equity waiver acting company. This particular acting company that I was part of, this theater, we call it a theater. I don't remember what the building was, it's not important, but the stage we built at one end of the building, there were no wings. So if your character exited, you climbed out a window and you'd run around the building and you'd enter on the window on the other side. It was hilarious, just hilarious. But if you love theater, you make it happen.
Oh, Helen's been waiting too. There's been such a bustle in the house, she expects something.
The artistic director at that time was Lance Roberts, and he was one of the original cast members in Cats on Broadway. He said, I've seen the way you study not only your own character, but the other characters, and how you react to them, and how you observe what they do, and how you learn from that. And he said, I think you could be a director. I said, oh, absolutely not, you're crazy. I didn't ever think that I would be a director. He said, no, I think you should. So I said, well, only if you are there to guide me, because I have no idea really what to do. And he said, no problem, I'll be there. And so the very first show that I directed was called Hush Little Baby, brand new playwright. And Dramalog would go to see all of these equity waiver productions. And I won Best Director for my very first show. I couldn't believe it. And after that, of course, I had to direct again. We had the Northridge Earthquake. I was 9 miles from the epicenter. I mean, I went through earthquakes. You don't live in California without going through earthquakes. But this was the first one where And it was like 4:30 in the morning, and I felt the rumbling, and I thought, oh, it's just another one. And the rumbling got worse and worse, and finally my bookcase fell over on the bed, and the bed flipped and knocked me to the floor. And I looked out at my living room, and my living room was twisting. I mean, it was twisting. And things were flying off shelves. It was just awful, and I heard screaming everywhere around it. Finally, it stopped, and then I could hear crying, and I heard helicopters, and I could smell gas, and the earthquake had cracked the swimming pool so that all of the water had splashed into all of the ground floor apartments, flooding everything. And all of the walls were cracked. And I waited until the sun came up so that I could be safe to walk around. And my apartment was a mess, but by comparison to when I walked down and saw what was going on down there, I could not believe it. And then I walked out onto the street, and I saw the apartment building just down 2 doors from us. The whole front of the apartment was missing. It was like shaving off the front, the facade of the apartment building. You could look into everybody's apartment. 2 doors down the other side of the street, the entire building had collapsed onto the underground parking, and there were people that were trapped. And that's when I realized, this is dangerous. I had no idea. They were just rumbles up to that point, and maybe a cracked window or, you know, something minor, but you get used to it. But not that one. The place where I was doing my day job, that whole building crashed to the ground. So they couldn't even give us our last paycheck. They have no money. So I said, okay, it's time. And I moved in with my then boyfriend, and he was living in Palmdale, California, which is about 70 miles out of Los Angeles. And I thought, okay, this is probably far enough away so that I can regroup. I thought, okay, I've taught before, so maybe I can get a job teaching at the high school. So I did, and I taught there for 4 years. And then my sister, who lives here, said, we've just built a house, and we'd love to have you come and see it. So I booked myself out, and I came here for 3 weeks. It was wonderful, very much like Minnesota. All of the woods and the rivers and the lakes, without the 3 feet of snow on the ground and the sub-zero temperatures. So I thought, okay, this is a good compromise. And my sister said, put your money where your mouth is. I enjoyed the silence, because there is no silence in LA. There are helicopters overhead with their spotlights, 7 lanes in one direction, and there are 7 lanes on the other side. And now, if I'm at a 4-way stop and there's one other vehicle at the 4-way stop, doggone it, traffic jam. When I bought the house, I was staying with my sister, and she said, come on, you got to come down to the Peacock. The Peacock? What's that? Well, it's a theater. Oh, sure. So I walked in the door, and my jaw dropped. I stood at the top of the aisle, and I said, oh my gosh, it's a proscenium theater. It's got a fly loft, a union low grid. Oh my God, who would have expected this? And the producer who was doing the show found out that I had just purchased property, and she came up to me and she said, how would you like to direct the next musical? I said, sure, why not? I know I'm coming back. And they said, well, it's The King and I. I agreed, and I said, you know, I'm a little concerned about costuming, because this is pretty fancy fabric, you know, for the king and his wives and the children. I said, take me to your local fabric shops. Well, the local fabric shops are fabulous, but they're all cotton, and they just don't have the kind of fabric that the king and I needed. So I went back to LA, and I bought hundreds of yards of fabric and shipped them here so that the seamstresses could make all the robes and saris and things that they would need. And we had a wonderful turnout, and I thought the show was very, very well done. And Gary Stepp, the superintendent of schools for Cherokee County, was in the audience. I went back to LA and I got a phone call. He said, "Miss Adams?" I said, "Yes." And of course, I wasn't used to hearing a Southern accent at that point. I was struggling to try to understand what he was saying. He said, "This is Gary Stepp, and I'm the superintendent of schools here in Cherokee County, and I was wondering if you'd like to set up a drama program for us." "Excuse me, who's this?" And he said, "Well, I just saw this production of King and I thought maybe it's time for us. We got our football underway now, and we got our sports on their feet, and I thought maybe it was time to start the arts, you know." I thought, oh, what a great opportunity. Absolutely, yes. So they flew me in. I had the interview, and we shook hands, and flew back to LA and continued my work there. And then another phone call in like April, and this Dr. Jeanette Hedrick, and I was just wondering when you were coming. When I was coming, what to do? Well, we had an interview, remember, for the setting up the drama program. Yeah. Well, we're offering you the job. Well, I didn't get a contract. We shook hands. I said, "Yeah? Well, shaking hands here is the same as a contract." I thought, yeah, this is where I want to live. Morals and ethics.
It takes a lot of people to do a show, whether it's good or whether it's bad. Or worse, mediocre. I just want you all to know that no matter how big a part you have, you are just as much a part of this as I am. So thank you all for being in this show.
Up to this point, up to this year, I've directed every show just about. As the artistic director, one of my main jobs is to decide what the season is going to be. So I read the script, and once I have decided on my short list for the next season, because I've got 4 plays, 1 musical and 3 plays to choose, then I start circulating them around to my reading committee and get a second opinion.
Flash the skirt. Sit. Turn right.
In LA, anything goes. I don't know of anything that was too risque. My jaw dropped a couple of times when I first moved there and looked at some of the things they called theater, but if that's not your thing, don't go. But here, things are much more conservative, and that is fine with me. It's absolutely fine. I have no problem at all with that, because basically I was raised that way.
The home where the wind comes sweeping down the plain way.
So here, the demographic is different and the values are different. That's all. And so I try to choose plays that I know will be appealing and not offend people. There have been some shows that I've chosen that have been a little what we call avant-garde or experimental, close, you know. I choose some shows that are just a little bit out there, but not too much.
What are we gonna do? Here he comes! Look out! Run!
You have to shuffle the plays around according to whether it's low season or high season here. Because I like to have a thriller or a mystery or something in the fall or October, Halloween is coming up. The leaf lookers are here, so we've got a lot of tourists at that time.
Now you sit on the chair, you turn right, you stand up, and the men pull the chairs away from you.
After the script is chosen, then it's time to prepare the prompt book. I take the original script and I paste it onto an 8.5 by 11 so that I've got plenty of room in the margins for all the cues, because I have to decide my light cues, my sound cues. I have to decide on shifts, furniture, you know, the set on the stage, and I have to have all of my blocking notes because I pre-block the show. There are 5 general areas on the stage that you always want to make sure that you use so that visually it's interesting to the audience. And so once I get my prompt book set up, Then it's time for me to start thinking about pre-blocking the show, which means I have to have a set design. I have to read the play 3 times. First time is, do I like it? Second time is, can we do it? And the third time is for the set design. So I make up my set design then and draw it out on graph paper so I know that it's going to fit our stage. And then I can pre-block it from that point on.
Well, open it, can't you?
For blocking purposes, your protagonist heroes come in from the stage right side, audience left, and the villains come in from the stage left side. Now you want to know why. Okay, if you sit down and read, you're reading from your left to your right. New information. So new information is usually the hero coming on with new information about the play, the cast, the plot, and so forth. And then he runs bang into our villain, and that stops him in his tracks.
And that is a change. You used to come in over on the left, but I think the right is going to look better.
From the audience perspective, left to right, left to right.
Okay, you cheat left and you cheat right, so that part of the audience gets a chance to see you talking to them, and the same thing over here. It's not like you're crossing to the other side of the world. It's just a simple change to see some movement.
Okay, well, just hold it.
The last 2 weeks are usually very, very stressful. And sometimes it's the show, sometimes it's odds and ends. Costumes may not be ready or props may not. Something didn't arrive in the mail and it was supposed to have.
Ready and, but that's no reason why they can't be friends. Territory folks should stay together. Territory folks should all be pals. All right, okay.
In this community, ticket sales don't really rev up until 2 weeks before the show. And so you never know whether the show is going to be a success ticket-wise, you know, and that's important. This is a nonprofit organization, and we have to make some kind of revenue in order to keep our doors open.
Hooray! All right, now we have some conversation, and we hear the solo lines being sung. And then, after Curly sings, soon be living in a brand new state. Brand new state, going to be great.
Volunteers, of course, want to have fun as well as actually do the job. So you do have to make allowances for some fun moments and learn to laugh at mistakes or silly gaffes and puns and that sort of thing. Whereas professionals, time is money, because every single second that you're snickering or laughing or in a huff and walked off the set, that's costing the producer and the exec producer millions, perhaps. And of course, I come from that background of where it's all about the business. Let's get on with this. So I have to make friends with, but it's okay to laugh. All right, if we have to laugh, all right. You know? That's probably the biggest adjustment. When I'm between shows, I try to get out in the yard as much as I can. It's a big yard. I've got 2.5 acres here, and it's almost all landscaped, so I've got things to do out there all the time. But when I'm really in a show, I don't have time to do that. So when I'm finished with a show, there's so much work that sometimes I just can't get caught up. And now I'm already starting the next show, so.
So, you know, we glue together some places that are rickety and then something else falls apart. That's show business, folks. You know what the saying is? Yeah. Lousy dress rehearsal.
Great! The house is sold out, and not only Sunday is also sold out. So, I mean, it's sold out. So, we're going out with a blaze of glory tomorrow. And it's all because of you.
I hope to light the fire under more people every show, whether it's coming back for another show as an audience member, or whether it's, you know, as a kid I always wanted to do A Christmas Story, and I never was brave enough to do it. And do I have the guts now to do it? I don't know, do you? Come on. It's fun to see the people who come to audition, for example, who will say, because I ask, you know, how did you hear about it? Why are you here? Well, I always wanted to try and see if I could do it, or I did it in high school, and then I kind of lost my path, and just thought it'd be fun to try again. And I just want more people, because without the arts, without imagination, who are we? Is it all about work, 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 pay the bills? Is it all about raising kids, making sure you're not caught in the wrong place at the wrong time? Is it all about fear and danger and worry and anxiety? Come on. As we grow older, all of those worries and anxieties and the sadnesses and the losses and all of that eat us alive, and we forget the joy. And that's what imagination brings, and that's what the arts bring.